Welcome to Little Shoots, Deep Roots, where we become faith gardeners, cultivating deep faith in our families, one little habit at a time. I'm your fellow gardener, Christie Thomas, and I get to introduce you to another fellow gardener today, Sarah Ruth Owens. Thank you so much for joining us, Sarah Ruth.
Hi, Christy. It's so good to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Tell us a little bit about your family, about you, and then I'll ask my next question.
I'm Sarah Ruth. I'm mom to 3 little boys, and my husband and I are raising them in the mountains of Northeast Georgia in the USA. So I've kind of flipped the script on what is usually the traditional family life for conservative Christians in the USA. Dad working, maybe mom working, but definitely dad working a lot of hours and kind of taking that load. We have had the privilege of being able to kind of release my husband from that over the years, and he works for himself, and it's given us a lot of family time and a lot of time to just prioritize these years when our kids are in our home full time.
So tell me, why were you so passionate about making that happen, about connecting as a family and having your husband home during these years? Because you're right, that is very different from how most families are operating. I mean, most families around here are operating on both parents working. But
Yeah.
so then to have both parents home, that's interesting.
Yeah. Well, and we are both working, but we've established kind of a family culture where we both work for ourselves, and it's kind of a team effort versus him carrying that load the way that he used to. So for us, it was a slow build of many things, but he was unhappy. He didn't love his job, and I always like to talk about that when I talk about this, because some mothers will say, well, my husband loves his work and we still have family time and he's not exhausted when he comes home and he makes time for the kids. And then I'm like, well, that's working great for you. Don't change a thing. But for our family, my sons were very connected with my husband by the time they were 2 or 3. He is just a great dad. And when he would leave for work, Christy, they would cry. Like, they would wake up. He would leave at 4:30 in the morning to get in his box truck and drive for hours. My oldest would just bawl his eyes out crying for his dad. His sleep was interrupted. He knew his dad was going to be gone until 6 or 7 that night. So not only was my husband not loving his job, but we were barely making ends meet, and he was working like 50, 60 hours a week. My children were not seeing him, and he was exhausted all the time. Weekends didn't feel great for him because there was the burden of, do I care for our home? Do I, do the yard? Do I all these other responsibilities? And the family time was just lost. And it felt like, why do we have these children that we adore? And I'm married, and we're not getting the richness and the fullness of family life from this time. So that was really what provoked the change. I had a premature baby. My third son was premature, and we'd already been having some conversations. I had started teaching ESL online just part-time, like while I was pregnant with him, just a few hours a week. And it was great money. I was getting paid more hourly than he was making hourly. And I started telling him, I was like, you're so unhappy. You come home unhappy. You come home tired. And I was like asking him questions like, baby, is there any other thing that you're passionate about that we can, like, even if you needed to work full time at something else, I didn't want a miserable husband for the next 3 years. And so when my son arrived prematurely, my husband had to take several weeks off because we had 2 older sons, and people who have experienced this will understand. It just throws your life into complete chaos until the child is well again. And at the end of that period, we found out that his plant was closing, but they were offering him one of 10 positions in like a new endeavor they were doing. And I just looked at him and I said, is this your way out? Because he would have gotten a severance. And I said, is this is this our opportunity? And so in the midst of bringing home our sick newborn, and it was Christmas time, the Lord is so funny sometimes, I think, in the seasons and how he opens doors, and you kind of have to pay attention and really try to listen to the Holy Spirit. And I just kept asking my husband questions. I didn't want to force his hand. He wanted to make sure we were still provided for, but I wanted to give him the opportunity if he I wanted to make sure he saw that there was an opportunity for change. And he saw it and he took it, and it totally changed our life.
Yeah, that's so incredible. And you know what I love about what you were talking about is that connection for you, connecting as a family wasn't just about like you and the kids or just kind of making the best of a bad situation, although sometimes that's all you can do. But it was really this more holistic, like our whole family needs to be connecting together. Dad's a part of that too. He's not just here in this role as a provider, but that he's part of the connecting as a family. I love that. So what does like togetherness and connection look like in your family?
A lot of ways that we try to do it. One way that we're real intentional is that we eat meals together. I would say, I mean, I can't give you an exact number, but I'd say 90% of our meals are eaten with all of our family present. Even like today, my husband had to run out and do some jobs. He does landscaping now for himself. We ate breakfast and lunch together, and then he went on and he'll get home later and we'll have dinner together. So, part of the shift in his work permitted us to build our days around those connection points that we appreciate. Doesn't mean every meal, but the majority of our meals include our whole family. And then another way we connect is that my husband's been amazingly involved in our homeschool co-op. I am kind of the visionary for it, but he has stepped into being there every week. And even beyond that, we started a new something called the Guild for Older Boys, which is like an apprenticeship kind of mix for 10 to 14-year-old boys. And my husband has taken the reins of that. So I did all the planning on the back end, but he is the present face of it. So when the boys meet together, I step away and my husband and another friend who is a dad take the reins. So I think, we're talking a little bit about the whole family perspective. One thing that I think moms especially can really latch onto, even if your life can't look just like mine, because we're not supposed to carbon copy one another. But if you have a husband that's working outside the home, or you have a husband in a different situation than mine, is praying and asking the Holy Spirit to guide. How do you invite your spouse in a way that respects his talents and gifts and his role as the father? So, that might look like making sure he's always aware of the Chick-fil-A, you know, father-daughter night, making, whatever it is that will work with your schedule and your husband's abilities and time. And I think that's something the Lord continues to convict me about is it's easy for us as mothers and nurturers to like be the busy bee and always fill all the little gaps and the roles, but it's okay to see that they need their father in this space, and it's not your place, in every single way to fill all the needs and all the connection points.
That's so important, and especially I mean, I have boys too, and as they get older, they they need him more and more. We kind of when my husband and I got married, we joked that I would raise the kids until they were 12, and then he would take whoever, because he was a high school teacher, and I was like, "I don't know how to talk to teenagers." I've really enjoyed the high school years, but I do find, yeah, like the conversations that he's able to have with them. He likes to have those like philosophical conversations and stuff. So he's rising a lot more and enjoying that a lot more now, I think.
So important. Yeah.
So what kind of fruit have you seen from this way of life, like focusing on really just connecting as a family?
Yeah. I just think there's a lot more balance for my kids. They know my husband and I so well. It's so funny to listen to them. They'll be like, "Oh, that's mom. Oh, that's dad." Like when they see some reference to something or, in media or whatever, they immediately can pinpoint our roles or what our personalities are like. And I know that's not necessarily fruit, but I think being known within the family context is part of what God wanted, like, these intimate relationships that eventually, once you've learned how to navigate these relationships within family, within this safe space, that leads to the safety of a relationship with God, right? That we've learned, you know, authority loves. There's love in the authority figures, and there's beauty and, uh affection and intimacy to be found within boundaries. And in my opinion, that is part of why God established family. And so, if we do it well, if we steward it well, then the fruit is my hope. And I have a 12-year-old, so I can't speak to 25-year-olds but my hope is that over over time, they will transition this to an understanding of the Godhead and that they have been in a safe, loving, healthy family. And now, as they grow older, they love God because He is their authority and He's the one after their heart and after their time and after relationship with them. So, I guess to answer your question, I don't know that I can, have this raving review of we've done it all right and my kids. And, the truth is, I don't know that that's how it works. I think we can have the hope and the belief that, his word doesn't return void. But in truth, I'm being faithful to these things because I know I'm accountable to my Father in heaven. And I'm going to give an account one day for how I stewarded this time. I understand it's not a formula for perfect children and that they get to decide, if they follow the narrow way or not at some point.
I'm actually glad there's not a formula for perfect children because I'm sure that we mess it up all the time.
Yes, you are so
No formulas needed. I like what you said about their relationship becoming kind of the basis for their understanding of God. Because I was reading a book about like neurobiology and God a while back, and I didn't finish it. It was a little bit too heady for me, but it was as I was reading it, part of what they were talking about is having a solid relationship with your parents can make a really big difference in your understanding of who God is and their love. And a while back, also, I was talking with somebody, and we were talking about little habits. And he said that his dad every night would say, "I love you." And he just kind of thought, that's just kind of something we do, didn't really think about that impact. But as we were talking, and I was talking about the impact of little habits, he said, "Wait, hold on. I actually think this had a huge impact on me," because he's, like, in his mid-30s now, and he's got his children of his own, and he said, "Well, lots of my friends were dealing with, like, does God actually love me? What does that look like?" He never once doubted the love of God because he saw his dad saying, "I love you," or he heard his dad saying, "I love you," every day, and so that actually did impact him as a teenager, as an adult. He didn't have those kind of some of those questions that his friends did because maybe they didn't experience that kind of love in human form. So I think it does make an impact. I mean, you're right. Your oldest is 12, so you may not be seeing the fruit now, but I'm pretty confident that you will. So, are there some little things that you've done in the past, when your kids were little, or that you do now to just connect with your boys on a fairly regular basis?
Yeah, so one of my boys is an early riser, and he has been since he was very little, like 1, 2, and we have some boundaries in place in our home where my kids aren't supposed to come downstairs until 7:30, and that gives they're allowed to play quietly upstairs, but they're not to disturb others who are resting. But when I realized that this was innate in him and, like, he's always gonna be an early bird, we flexed that rule for him, and he would come down quietly at, like, 7. And I always just purposefully put down whatever I was doing because I was never just sitting on the couch. I was usually starting a meal or whatever it was that I was busy. But I made it a habit to just, as soon as I saw his little face, I scooped him up. I had a couple picture books ready to go, and we would snuggle and I would just read him a picture book or two. It took less than 10 minutes. It filled his little cup from toddlerhood even until like 6 or 7, we did this. And so I think noticing your children and then choosing within however they're bent to find those points of connection really works well. I have another son, my middle son, who loves engineering. He naturally can build things and just his mind just works in this way. And so I read something, I can't remember what book it was, but about side by side relationships with boys, how women, we like to look each other in the eye and we want to sip our, cup of tea or coffee or, we exactly, we want this like point of connection that's very, relational. But with boys, it was saying, finding a way to connect with them where they're beside you, not across from you, and they're doing something they enjoy and you're stepping into their world. And so with that son, I've made it a point that if I see him getting engaged in a build or if he's really excited to tell me about a map he's making or whatever, I drop what I'm doing and I spend that 5 or 10 minutes with him just learning about what is interesting him. Again, that's just in my opinion, that's the same. I've tried to build a habit in myself to notice, what how is my child naturally bent so that I can find a point of connection there. And I think any mom can do that. Like it's not going to be the same reading, snuggling and reading stories with your early riser. It's going to be something, maybe that child loves to play catch and loves baseball and you aren't a baseball girl, but you can walk outside for 5 minutes before you fix dinner and throw the ball back and forth, or look at his baseball cards so I think realizing that it's the small moments, you mentioned little habits, doesn't have to be these 45-minute long meals, which I aspire for, but it can also be just the little times that you don't let go. I've made a habit of not letting go first in hugs. And I've seen that trending lately. And I'm like, yes, I'm doing it right. But for years, I've always tried to, when my boys hug me, like just let them hug me as long as they want because it's never been a 10-minute hug. I always have time to give them a 2 or 3-minute hug if that's really what they need. So yeah, those are a couple things. And then Chrissy, I don't wanna overtalk, but I did bring something to show that is a way that we connect now. I'm a big believer in doing things with them, so it's like stopping, pausing in my time and moment because moms were so busy, it's easy to just yeah, son, I hear you while you're like cooking or cleaning. But I feel like if we stop and completely engage with them, even if it's just 10 minutes, that I think it's really important. So one thing that I do on a fairly regular basis is we will do just little art things together. So this is all four of us, three of my boys, and even my husband has begun to do this. It makes me so happy. I never pushed him. He's not a painter. He's a draw, he likes to draw but I've caught them late at night drawing cars together, and, it's just beautiful to see them in the breakfast room at 9 p.m. drawing race cars and, putting their improvements. They're all copying my husband, and it's like, I don't know, I just feel like these things are so important. So for me, it's, watercolor. It's 10 minutes of I'll just set up the paints in the morning, put them on the table, and my boys are immediately interested and I just stop what I'm doing and I do it with them. And then we have little keepsakes or something to send to somebody as an encouragement. So I know that doesn't work for everyone, but if you can find those little things that your children will buy into, that you can just spend 5 or 10 minutes committed together, I think that can really create memories and connection.
I love that. So I was kind of writing down, I feel like there's kind of some points here that I wanted to come back to. So, first of all, we're noticing our kids. We're noticing what makes them tick and what they're interested in and what they like to do. And then we also need to make sure that we stop or we drop what we're doing. And that's so hard, right? But I remember talking to a homeschool mom when I first started, and she said, because she was also working, like full time working and full time homeschooling. So she told me that when her kids, she, instead of saying like in just a minute, she would say, just for a minute. So not in just a minute, but just for a minute. Like I have a minute right now. I will drop what I'm doing. I will stop typing. I will look at you. I will make eye contact. I will listen to you, whatever. So that was for her. That's what worked for her. But you're talking about, intentionally being willing to just stop what I'm doing.
It's usually just short, it's these 10 and 15-minute blips, where you can train yourself to put everything down for that short period. You're going to get that back, but we don't get our kids' undivided attention back. We don't get this moment in time. And I don't like to guilt trip myself or others about, you only have 18 hours, it can feel so overwhelming, right? But we can train ourselves to be aware that our lives are a vapor and this moment is going to pass. So now we get to choose. Do we invest it in togetherness right now, or is whatever I'm doing more important? And sometimes I do have to tell my children, I will get to that,
Yeah.
around 2 today, or mommy must finish this. But when I'm finished, remind me. So I'm not saying have no boundary.
That's true. You know what? I was talking to Erin Lynham, and she has written a book on Sabbath rest. And so she said sometimes her kids will say, like, will you paint with me today, mom, or something? And she will say, I like right now is a time when I cannot. But on our Sabbath day, remind me and we'll do it then. And then she has time then. And they get to kind of come back around to it. And so I thought that was beautiful. So if we can't, let's make sure that maybe we can I don't know. It's great to have that time set aside. I don't know the answer to that. If there's not going to be something that works for everyone, but I always love hearing from moms like you because you're different from me and your family's different from me. So I'm getting ideas and getting inspired, right? These conversations are never about guilt tripping people into thinking your family has to look exactly like Sarah Ruth's, but about getting inspired and saying, "Oh, maybe that's something that I could try." So, thanks for sharing your ideas. Now, I know that you have a book that you wrote, right? Can you
Yeah,
tell us a little bit about that? I'd love for you to share that because I feel like it kind of fits with this theme.
yeah, thank you for asking. I wrote a devotional for families, and I brought it here. It's our copy is getting grimy. I was
Don't
like, "Should I even
worry.
show this?"
Yes, you can.
Everyday banquets. And what it is 52 devotionals for family. So I grew up Jewish and we still keep a Sabbath. It is typically on Saturdays, but my husband's also evangelical. So we're very blended. And uh, sometimes it is a Sunday Sabbath, despite me really wanting to keep a Saturday one. Um, but the idea is based off of the Jewish Sabbath that every week a family would have this set aside meal time to just bless one another, pray over one another, and intentionally dine together and even dig into God's word and have meaningful conversation. So I wrote this with that thought process that every family can find one meal a week. Surely, even if mom and dad both work, it's meant to not overwhelm the family, but instead to meet you where you are and try to help you develop your own rhythms of family time that when you finish this devotional and it's kind of guiding you, that you have a framework and you can continue on without the book. So it's set up seasonally. You can start at any time of year. It's not like a progression that builds upon itself, but there are recipes for each season. There's 4 recipes for every season. There are 4 hymns for each season. And then it walks you through both the liturgical calendar from an evangelical standpoint. So you talk about Christmas and Resurrection Sunday, but it also includes the biblical feasts from a traditional Jewish standpoint, but with the Messiah brought in. So it's kind of what our lives have been like. And I just really was thankful that Hosanna Revival decided it was a project worth taking on. It's a very beautiful book. I could have sought out a bigger publisher and maybe it would have been picked up, but I do not think any other publisher would have made it as beautiful. So it's like heirloom quality, I feel like when people see the inside, it's just something to really um enjoy. And the recipes have all been tested. Hosanna, their publishing team, made every recipe in the book. I
To
was
make sure it tasted good.
they had a big meal together and they were like, "Your food's so good." And I'm like, "Really, it is?" So, they took gorgeous photos. So it's kind of like it is a devotional for families, but it's also a beautiful coffee table, book to just keep out so you can maybe invite friends over and have a meal or, the sheet music is in there for the hymns. So anyway, that's how it's set up, and it's very simple devotionals designed, not from any particular theological premise other than we believe God is God and his word is true. It has a lot of open-ended questions so that you and your family can talk about your own belief system regarding whatever was presented in the devotional.
Love that. So my only question is, why don't I have a copy yet? Why have I not gotten this already? This is ridiculous. Where is it available? Where can I get it? I'm gonna go get it today.
Revival. Yeah, it's on Hosanna Revival's website. It's not anywhere else, unless you
Okay.
find it in some small shops. I get about once a month, somebody will message me and be like, "Look what I found," and they're in some cool, obscure coffee shop or somewhere in the country or in Canada, and they find my book on the shelf, and it makes me so happy. But
Exciting.
Hosanna Revival is where you can purchase it, and like I said, I couldn't be happier with the presentation. They were very careful. They had like 8 editors go through it and 2 or 3 have like doctorate of divinities. Like, so they were questioning me on my theology. Anywhere that theology was present, they were like, "Hey, but what about this?" And so they were very conscientious
Hmm.
about what was put in here. Yeah.
I love that. That's beautiful. We will definitely link to that in here.
Thank
Okay,
you.
so as we wrap up here, I want to ask you one more question. What's one thing that you'd say to encourage a parent or maybe a grandparent who wants to connect deeper with their kids but is struggling to maybe even just find the time?
Yeah. I would say bring them into what you're doing. So if you can't meet them, if you can't drop everything and go to what they're doing, then flip it around. If you're in the kitchen cooking dinner, and that's actually one of the invitations in this book, is like every single devotion says, these are ways you can invite your teen in to the meal. These are ways you can invite your toddler in. These are ways all 52 devotions have tips for in the kitchen to make the kitchen time a point of connection. So, if you're a busy working parent and you get home at 5:30 and you have kids to run to ball fields, and I mean, I get it. Life can be really busy. Invite them in to what you're doing. I remember when I was a girl, my mom worked for a dental office and she would sometimes bring home work, and it was simple things like collection letters she had to send out. I didn't know that's what they were at the time, but she taught me how to tri-fold them like the
Hmm.
correct way so that when the person opened it, she taught me how to address the envelopes, how to stamp the return. And in doing that, we were spending time together, right? Now, this was her job.
Hmm.
But to me, as an 11 or 12-year-old kid, I have fond memories of sitting on the living room floor with a stack of 300 letters beside my mom, and we did this together and we just talked. And so I think learning how to bring them into your tasks can also be a great way to save time and still connect.
That's perfect. Well, thank you so much. I really love that final tip there. That I'm glad we made time for that. Awesome. Thank you so much for joining me today. This has been really excellent.
Aw, thank you, Christy. It's an honor, and I hope people are able to grab just a thing here or two that'll bless their families.
I'm sure they will. Thank you.